I'm really glad Ben was able to join us.
He made it.
If you watch on the video version, Ben is here in spirit. He's a
He
piece
looks
of paper
great.
taped to his chair in his office.
Yeah, I mean, he looks better than he usually does. So when Sean and I were talking about what we could talk about, I think there were a couple of things that came into my mind. You know me, I'm a deep diver. I love just getting into the nitty gritty of stuff. And I threw out a couple of options, and uh, Sean said I should go with this one. So we are going to talk about the recent controversy around Dungeons and Dragons and the open gaming license. That's what we're going to.
Wait, you said D&D. I thought it was a do not disturb thing. I thought
That would be a very short one. And I don't know that it's drama filled. This is, though. Yeah, and a quick warning, a trigger warning, unless Sean wants to edit these parts out. There is a violent crime that happens in the middle of this story. So add a little suspense, or we'll just edit that 10 seconds.
Do you mean in the middle? Like, are you going to attack me?
Yes.
Like violent in the podcast is going to
I'm
happen?
actually, yeah.
Is that where
virtual
Ben
guy-
is? Is Ben on his way to my house?
I love this new format.
No, we're all posy vibes here, but there is a little bit of not great stuff that happens sort of in the middle of Dungeons and Dragons lifespan. But we'll get there.
Okay. Hello. Hi. Oh, I'm in the middle of a podcast. That's why I didn't answer. And then I tried to call you back because I thought, well, what if she's in a ditch with the baby? I don't want to be the dad who didn't answer. Yeah, you called me and then I answered and you hung up. And then I called you twice in a row and you didn't answer. So I figured that you had died. But I was going to do the podcast anyway. So it was a butt dial? Awesome. Boom.
Okay, so we're going to talk about the recent controversy of D&D and the open gaming license and subsequent sort of fallout from it. But I think first we should get into a little bit of history of D&D because I think it has a really interesting there are an interesting series of events that lead up to this moment. And so we're going to go all the way back to a basement in Lake Geneva, Wisconsin, believe it or not. D&D invented Dave Arneson and Gary Gygax. They formed this company in 1974 called TSR, Tactical Studies Rules, which is a real choice of a name. So they invented Dungeons and Dragons, and D&D has obviously a really open history. If you're not big into the D&D community, or you don't play D&D, or you haven't been doing it for very long, I think one thing that's really important to understand, I guess, what is D&D? It's playing pretend with adults or kids. Yeah, it's an all ages game. But it's really kind of rooted in storytelling and making your own adventure, collaborating with your friends to sort of tell this really interesting story and kind of explore personality traits and characteristics that you wouldn't be able to in the real world, especially if you're wielding a sword.
Well, you can, but just the one time.
Yeah, you get one go, unless you're like a real life rogue. So Dave Arneson, Gary Gygax, they make this company called TSR, and they start publishing Dungeons and Dragons. Right. So throughout the 70s, the 80s, and into the 90s, TSR is publishing rule sets. They're publishing all sorts of accessories and adventure module books, things like that. And TSR, when you think about Dungeons and Dragons and how open and collaborative the storytelling is, it's kind of hard. I can see it as being difficult for a company like TSR to figure out how to monetize that and kind of make it a solvent business. And it's something that a lot of creators struggle with to this day in the D&D community, in the tabletop role playing game community.
That's not limited to the D&D creator community.
It is not. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, obviously, I don't want to minimize the experience of anybody who creates literally anything. But so that was a challenge for them, and it sort of had always been a challenge. They're a relatively small business. And so one of the things that they started to do, Satanic Panic was a really interesting sort of moment for D&D. And that's not what this is about. We're not really going to talk about the Satanic Panic thing, but in the 80s and in the early 90s even, you had this massive movement of people that were rallying against things like D&D because its depiction of demonic symbolism and things like that. And that had a fantastic Barbara Streisand effect for D&D. So you had more and more people that were introduced to it, and they were like, "Hey, I would love to write a story that somebody else can play." TSR, the struggling business that it was consistently chasing those folks away. There were a lot of lawsuits, there were copyright infringement cases. They were sort of all over the place.
Now, did
And
they have like copyrights on like the terminology, or what was the problem with somebody else like writing a story? How do you litigate against that?
yeah, so I think the reality is I didn't dig too far deep into this, but I think the reality is it's the rules. So the mechanics of using a D20 to do certain things were what they were going after people for. And using all of the sort of like the lingo, the verbiage. Like one of the things TSR did really early on was they changed the name of hobbits was originally used. They changed that to halflings to circumvent any issues with the Tolkien estate. Okay. Yeah. So they're going after people, and there's when you do that, when you have people that are champions of this sort of storytelling thing, and you go after them, you kind of quell this creator community that could rise up. And TSR had problems. They couldn't really manage their publishing costs in the 90s. So a wonderful human being who I've actually had the pleasure to meet, Peter Adkins, who is the founder of Wizards of the Coast, bought TSR in 1997. Undisclosed amount of money. They were sort of part of a larger deal, apparently. Another company called Five Publishing was purchased at the same time. They paid $25 million for it. So now Dungeons and Dragons is in the hands of Wizards of the Coast. So Wizards of the Coast, if you are unaware, is the group of human beings who are responsible for one of my favorite games of all time, and one of the world's, Magic the Gathering. So,
that's a D&D thing, or is that just the same company thing?
D&D starter kit? Am I belittling it by calling it that?
Oh my goodness, folks!
I am belittling it by calling it that. Good to know.
Danielle, have you ever played Dungeons and Dragons?
I am playing tonight, as a matter of fact. Although I won't say that the way I play is kosher, but I guess that's kind of the point, right?
Yep.
Okay.
There really is.
Okay.
You get in there, do what you want to do.
Yeah. I've never played at all. I have as much experience as current version of Ben in the podcast has. So.
Well, I'll tell you what. We can play whenever you want, and I'll get to this a little bit later. We could even play some stuff that's not D&D, but the same kind of idea. No, Magic the Gathering is a collectible card game.
Yes.
They popularized the this sort of like collectible card game industry. Things like Pokemon cards, Yu-Gi-Oh cards. Those are all kind of spin-offs of Magic the Gathering. And in the early 90s, in 93, Richard Garfield, God, if I forgot that name, anybody who liked Magic was going to come after me. Richard Garfield went to Wizards of the Coast, who was working on some RPGs and some other games, things like that at the time, pretty small company. Went to Peter Adkins and Wizards of the Coast, said, "Hey, I have this idea for a game." It was a different game. I think it was called Robo something, Robo Caller, something like that. Peter Adkins said, "Nope, we don't want it. But I would love for you to make a game that's really easy to play and card-based." So he creates Magic the Gathering. Magic the Gathering sells 2.5 million cards at Gen Con, which is the sort of preeminent board game convention.
And that's upon launch, like that first year?
Yeah, it like debuted a couple of months prior at Origins Game Fair, another convention. And then 2 months later, it went to Gen Con, and they sold 2.5 million cards. Boom, instant success. And now Magic the Gathering is what it is today.
So at this point, the Garfield guy worked for Wizards of the Coast?
Yes.
Okay. All right.
Yeah.
Had they purchased TRS?
TSR. No,
TSR.
not yet. So
TRS is the Tandy computer. Okay.
Yeah. The sort of, I think the success of Magic the Gathering led Wizards of the Coast to a place where they could acquire TSR and get the Dungeons and Dragons name. So they buy Dungeons and Dragons and Wizards of the Coast, who I will heretofore refer to as WotC. It is their acronym.
I was going to say, is that just something you want to do for fun?
No, WOTC, WotC.
Okay.
WotC ended up opening things up. So there had already been a couple of editions of D&D out. There was first edition and then second edition. In the late 90s, WotC released third edition. Third edition is still played today. A lot of people really love it. And WotC did something different with this one. They created the OGL. So the OGL is the Open Gaming License.
Can we call that one Ogle?
We can. I like Ogle maybe a little bit. Well, I guess that's actually
WotC Ogle. Okay. Oh, so wait, I thought this was drunk history. I'm sorry. I shouldn't have drank so much.
You're making it better, so love it. So WotC releases the third edition, and they release the OGL. And the OGL basically is the rules, and it's the it basically says that you can use any of the rules, and you can use any of the creatures and stats and things like that to build whatever you want, to make other books, to sell other books. Go crazy. We want this to. It was a great business strategy because they essentially said, use the Open Gaming License, use the words that are in the SRD, the Systems Reference Document. You actually had to under this OGL, and get Dungeons and Dragons into the hands of as many people as humanly possible. You can call it whatever you want, but you're going to use the words of our rules. You're going to use the creatures that we have. We're going to create a sort of cultural understanding that tabletop role-playing games are D&D. It's sort of how D&D became the Kleenex of tabletop role-playing games, or TTRPGs. So, third edition comes out. Terpugs, I think, is more accurate. That's what the folks in the biz say. Terpugs. Right. So there's like all of these network externalities. There's all of this stuff that's happening. Everybody's creating this content. It spurs dozens, maybe hundreds of companies to create content
because there was no like royalties or anything. Nope. The only rule was, in order to not pay us, you have to use our verbiage and stuff. I mean, that was the okay.
Essentially. And very quickly, that became what people actively wanted to do, because then you were synonymous with D&D, essentially. And I mean, I think to this day, if you open books that say 5e 5th edition on them, they'll say there's a little thing at the bottom that's like, this uses the OGL and the systems reference document. So there's all of this. There are all of these adventure modules that are coming out. People like Green Ronin Publishing, who's been around forever. They started when this third edition, this OGL, came out, and it created a bunch of spin-off things too, like systems outside of Dungeons and Dragons, like old school Renaissance OSR, simpler rule sets that are kind of more reminiscent of first and second edition D&D. And so this entire creator economy was developed because Wizards had the forethought to say, this is what we're going to do. We're going to open this up.
All right. I have a few questions, which may be just derailing, but there's a few things I'm trying to figure out. So the language, the story needs to be maintained. As you're building characters, did D&D also say, listen, here are the characteristics that you're working off of? So was there also what templates did they provide for characters? Or you had mentioned before, if you need a D20 for something, here are the parameters. Did all of that come in the box too? Or could that be customized?
Yeah. So all of the rules were there. And all of that can be customized and added to. So you'll have things like, items. There's basic swords in the systems reference document, but you can adapt that to fit sort of whatever you want. Just call it a different sword. Great, it's differentiated.
So the flask that I have of 2 unicorns having sex with special properties, would that have come from the original D&D book? I see you looking at that, John. Or is that something that perhaps was added on, later? I want to get specific here to make sure I understand and carry this into my session tonight.
Yeah. So first of all, I'd love to know more about that. Second, so the sort of any sort of mechanics that came out of it perhaps were derived from that SRD, those rules. And you can pull up the SRD and you can kind of see it's it'll have all of the races in there, right? So of the characters you can choose, and it'll have definitions, characteristics, traits of those races. You want to roll your own race? Fantastic, go for it. You want to make? Did you say it was a flask?
Yes.
You have a flask with 2 unicorns.
Yeah.
Fornicating. On it or in it?
Oh, on it. No, we didn't. There are no captured unicorns as far as I know.
Oh, it's not like
it could be a mystery yet to be revealed.
It's not like a pocket dimension wherein unicorns are actually. Okay.
No, but I'm going to go hunting for that now.
Yeah, you should seed that one into your DM's mind. So if it has mechanical functionality or whatever, there's a decent chance that it was derived from this sort of the rule set, this SRD.
All right, I'm going to interrupt now too.
Let's go.
What were you not allowed to do then? Because it sounds like you could modify and do anything, but you said as long as you used their terminology stuff, what couldn't you do? What was prohibited?
Very little, honestly. Very little was prohibited. You basically just had to credit WotC.
Okay.
And the LGL and the SRD.
Okay, that doesn't make sense. So it was like an attribution license kind of thing, more than guidelines.
Exactly.
Very loose guidelines. Okay, gotcha.
Yeah. So, all these companies spring up. D&D as a system becomes much more popular. We're talking late 90s now. So Wizards of the Coast, remember, bought D&D. They bought TSR in 97. In 99, I'm going to have to fact check that because this feels so quick. In 99, Peter Adkinson turns around, flips WotC as an organization with Magic and TSR and the other stuff that they were working on that is probably wonderful, but let's face it, less consequential than those two, for $325 million. So the folks at Wizards of the Coast had a gangbusters latter half of the night.
Was this a public company?
Wizards was not a public company. No.
Okay.
Hasbro. But
did I spoil that? Is that who they sold it to for Wizards of Waverly Place got sold to?
Oh, did I not say that? No, yeah. WotC. Wizards of Waverly Place. God, nerds are going to freak out when they hear this podcast.
In so many different ways already. Yes.
I'm sure that I've made a mistake too. So, yes. So Hasbro, makers of Monopoly, bought
the game,
bought Wizards for $325 million
of the game Monopoly, but trying to go for the concept of Monopoly too.
Yes.
See, that was a deep cut. I was proud of that. That's why I interrupted you again to say it. I thought it was
they're a publicly traded company. They're all going for
Monopoly.
Okay. That's the game these days. Yeah. So Hasbro
this is back in 99?
99. Yes.
Wow, okay.
Yeah, huge. So that happens. And then 2003 comes around. So third edition has been out for 5-6 years at this point. Everybody's loving it. we've got this OGL and the systems reference document. Hasbro kind of coasts on that for 4 years, doesn't do a ton with it, continues to release stuff. WotC's kind of just running it.
They bought WotC, but WotC was still functioning kind of independently inside the umbrella.
Yeah, and in a lot of ways still is today.
Okay, and the Peter guy, who's Peter Atkins, was still like running that, or did
no,
he moved away to an island somewhere.
Yeah, he may have worked in like consultations with it for a little while. I know, but he went on to other projects. Peter Atkins is now the owner of the convention Gen Con that I mentioned previously. He bought the convention. Yeah. Does a great job with it too. So WotC Hasbro decided that they were going to unilaterally fuck with everyone and release D&D 3.5. Now, D&D 3.5 did a couple of things. It changed a ton of the mechanics, like in a pretty major way. And anything that was being published under 3rd edition was, without a ton of work, pretty unusable under the 3.5 rules.
But couldn't you continue to play with, like you said, people are still playing with version 3 of the rules, right?
You could, except Hasbro nixed the OGL. They said, invalid document, you can't, we're not going to move forward with it. It's unsupported now. And Hasbro has the marketing power behind D&D at this point, and it's sort of grown into its own thing, this sort of cultural moment where 3.5 releases, and as a user, as a player who's not sort of in the business, is excited. There's new D&D stuff out. I'm stoked. I'm going to play 3.5. It's the early 2000s. Everything is still in paper. So everybody, this massive economy that they built up over the past 6 years of people who are publishing books and selling them at conventions, whatever, all of that paper are essentially paperweights at this point, almost overnight, because everybody's so excited about it.
And because the Ogle was gone, they couldn't continue business as usual and start producing the things at 3.5, even
correct,
which would have been a heavy lift anyway.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Okay.
Yep. Exactly. So you couldn't convert your stuff to 3.5. You could keep selling your 3.0 stuff, but nobody wanted it because 3.5 was out.
Okay. Oh, but the OGL was still valid for 3.0.
Yes.
Okay. I was going to say, otherwise that was a poorly worded document. If they could just like say, nah, change our mind. Okay, gotcha.
You just wait.
Okay.
So some of the beauty, though, of D&D is that, if you had the paper and if you loved 3.0, nothing needed to change for you, right? Like you could keep going. So, there's something new, people want to move to that, that's fine.
Yep.
We're screwing some of the people who had been, making some money off of integrating and leveraging D&D's name.
Yeah.
But players
screw them, it's about the art. Blah, blah, blah.
Yeah. Just okay.
Yeah.
Thank you. Keep going.
Yes. And that is one of the beautiful things about TTRPGs in general, is that you don't need a lot of money. You need some paper and a pencil, and you're good. You can play. You can be whoever you want to be.
That's why I really love Taturpigs. I just have always been a fan.
Yeah, it's a great reason to love. So
I named my kid Taturpig.
Wow, that's
my goat. I mean, who would name their child Taturpig?
What's
But it's
the
a great
nickname?
goat name. So my kid.
What do you call your goat for short? Pig?
Taturpig. Why would I shorten such a gorgeous name?
You're right. It rolls off the tongue so well.
Her full name is Tabletop Role Playing Game, but I mean...
Oh my God. Anyway, so the industry gets absolutely bitch slapped by WotC.
Flip down in its head. Is 3.5 significantly like cooler, or is it all marketing hype?
It's very different, and opinions very wild.
Okay.
Honestly, I haven't played a ton of 3rd edition or 3.5, so I don't know that I could say. I do know people still play 3. I know some people who play 3.5. But it was really different. So,
this is early 2000s.
early 2000s, 2003. So
Is
we
when
do
Ben's
that
going to come in and stab Sean. Is that happening soon?
soon.
Good.
Okay.
Get ready.
It's top of the hour now where I am, so I expect any moment.
Funny that you say that. We are getting to that point now.
I could feel the suspense building.
We're 5 years out. It's 2008, and fourth edition is released. I'm gonna have to fact check myself.
4 is bigger than 3.5. If that's the
4
thing you
is
were
bigger
fact checking,
Yeah,
I got your back, buddy.
everything was still open with 3.5 comes out. Bucks with the publishers. Everybody's still generally happy, but has to adjust everything. 2008, fourth edition comes out. Now, fourth edition, I think a lot of that stuff that I said about 3.5, I actually meant to say before. I don't think they removed the OGL for 3.5. I think that like the release of 3.5 just fucked with everybody.
The mechanics changed though, so that's still true, right?
Oh, so maybe they had to rewrite all their stuff, but they doubled down and invested because the OGL was so incredible. It was worth the effort.
Yeah. So
that makes for a better story anyway. So that happened. 3.5,
so I think,
but they're
I think that actually is what happened.
Okay.
God, I should have focused more on the history part of this. I thought this was going to be quick, and now I'm reading it. I'm like, oh, this is the whole podcast. So fourth edition comes out. Fourth edition does a couple of major things. This one does remove the OGL at the SR. Okay. They say absolutely not. Nobody can make anything unless you pay us a 25% royalty on everything that you produce with the new rules.
Oof.
Super restrictive usage.
Off the front end, 25%?
Off the top. It's just gross revenue, 25% cut. And these are publishing companies. It's 2008, but this is still very much a pen and paper game.
Yeah.
And so it's pretty much infeasible for anybody.
I don't know that 25% is the margin of profit at all.
No.
So
no. So yeah, and I mean it's just 25% is a company killer for these publishing companies. And then they said, hey, the other thing we're going to do, we see the sort of digital age coming. We're going to release a virtual tabletop. A virtual tabletop.
We're gonna what? You cut out there.
We're going to release
a virtual tabletop.
Okay.
Yes. And a virtual tabletop is just a way to play D&D online. That's it. I say that's it. Like, that's simple. There's a lot to it, but it's simple in nature, I guess. That virtual tabletop went into beta, and there was nothing special about it. Nobody really liked it. The other things on the market did whatever they specialized in better. And trigger warning, the senior manager of that project ended up murdering his wife, and he committed suicide.
Okay, I hate to say it again, but you whispered and it cut out again.
Oh no, did I really?
Yeah.
I heard it though, but you want to repeat it?
Yeah, let me eat the microphone a little bit here. So the senior manager of that project, it was not going well. The senior manager of the product ended up murdering the wife that he was estranged to, and he committed suicide. And it was a very public news story. It was sort of everywhere. And now, not only is fourth edition reviled because of the fact that they sort of removed all of these opportunities for the creator community, the virtual tabletop did not have great publicity. People didn't really like it. And now the senior manager, the leader of the development of it, committed this sort of heinous act. It ended up being scrubbed entirely.
The virtual tabletop or 4.0?
The virtual tabletop, but it didn't take long for fourth edition. Fourth edition never really got any traction. And if you talk to anybody that plays D&D today, nobody will ever mention fourth edition in any way, shape, or form. So we'll get here, but fifth edition came out in 2014. So there was a 6-year span where fourth edition existed. However, I've literally never met a human being who talks about it at all, other than to say it was a terrible disaster. It was from every angle. It was just a bad move.
And Hasbro didn't have the marketing push they had for 3.5 to actually make it happen because they had gotten so much free, air quotes, press already on
And-
stuff. Plus the ogle was gone and people had just done all the heavy lifting with 3.5. Okay. All right.
Yeah, and I mean, so theoretically too, like you still have this OGL also. So you have all of these publishers that are making this stuff for 3.5. I did figure out the answer to my question. I was sort of aligning some attributes to fourth. There was a creator community that was still making content for 3.5 that couldn't make it for 4. It was a more lively product in the end. So, because at the end of the day, when you think about it, D&D editions are just rules. They're just like, it's kind of the shittier part of the game. It's like roll a dice to do this at this point. So if there's a vibrant community in one, even if it's older, it will not be surpassed necessarily by this new version. So this OGL, though, is now unsupported, right? We don't support this OGL anymore. Don't use it. But, it still existed. It just wasn't supported anymore. In comes Pathfinder. So Pathfinder, here's a little fun fact for you. Pathfinder is a much, in the industry, you say it's crunchy. That means there's a shitload more rules to it. But Pathfinder was born from the original open gaming license. It used a lot of the rules and a lot of some of the mechanics, and they created their own rule set. And Pathfinder actually became the preeminent RPG in the period where 4th edition existed.
So, but it still had to have the disclaimer that it was using the OGL from 3.5?
Did it?
That it used the open gaming license. Yeah, I think they still say that. Like, I think they might still say that.
You would think they would have to.
I think they do. I actually don't. That's one of the few games that I actually don't have a book of sitting right here, but so I can't look at it. But I'm pretty sure that they reference the fact that they use the OGL. So Pathfinder comes out, and a bunch of other systems start coming out. You see this kind of proliferation of systems that are extra D&D. They're outside of D&D, but they're sort of based on this old OGL. And you still have those other ones we talked about before, right? OSR, and some other ones. So Pathfinder comes out, sort of hits the ground running with this really cool, kind of crunchy, unique, super customizable system. If you want to spend a ton of time building your character and making them really yours, Pathfinder's a great system. So a bunch of people flock to it because it's not that different. If you're used to playing sort of D&D 3 or 3.5, it's not that hard to pick up.
And there's less murder of real people involved.
Yeah.
Okay.
Less, I mean, presumably, we don't know, I guess, for sure, but
less public murdering.
Yeah. So there's this sort of real lull for Hasbro and Wizards of the Coast in D&D. So in 2014, they release 5th edition. 5th edition is absolutely a resurgence of D&D. I am sure it's the game that Danielle is playing in right now. It's probably a 5th edition game. And they opened the OGL back up. They said, we listened. We're not going to make this mistake again. And they came back. There was like this big resurgence.
Is this?
This was 2014.
Okay, you said that. I'm sorry. Yeah.
No, you're good. Don't worry about it. So they reintroduced the OGL. Everything is back. And
same parameters, like just reference us and you're good.
Yeah, basically.
Okay.
And generally speaking, the system, like the rule set, is good. It's a little bit less crunchy, which the Pathfinder players and people who played 3rd edition didn't really love, but it was a little bit more palatable to a wider audience. And as we know, over the course since 2014, which was 9 years ago, since 2014, we've seen the proliferation of D&D in culture, right? You have Stranger Things.
What is the E? Because is that just like a revision? Because there isn't like 5E something? Haven't I seen like
5th edition?
Oh, that just means edition. Okay.
Exactly.
Okay. Sorry.
No, you're good.
I told you I really had no idea. So these are genuine questions. I'm not trying to sound stupid. This is actual stupidity.
These questions have helped us.
Yeah. God only knows. I'm just so you guys know, I'm reading from notes that I made. There's no bullets. There's no organization to this at
Right,
all.
the
It's
bullets
just
were part of
sentence after
4.
sentence. Yeah. The
Wow.
Google Docs
Wow.
revoked bullets in their latest edition.
No, that was a
That was
version
another
4.
joke to the crime. It was the
Yeah, that was a
joke.
crime joke. Version 4 had the bullets.
Oh my
See,
God.
I know.
Yeah, it was
I
dark.
know.
Oh, where's my
Yeah.
I don't even have a
No, there's no sound effect.
Yeah.
I'll do that one.
Just like the
Okay.
hang up tone, dial tone of like
that's pretty good. I'm gonna write that down. So there's this big resurgence in D&D, right? Fifth edition is sort of everywhere. There are it's like a D&D video game comes out.
I was going to ask about that. How do video games work? Does that just use the open gaming license as well, or the OGL as well?
I mean, I think that's just Hasbro makes video games, sells the license and makes video games.
Okay, so probably not the same license that you can write books with, but they just whatever, they figured it out. Okay.
Yeah, exactly. So yeah, because the license to when you talk about the OGL, you're not really talking about like the setting or any specifics about the world that you're in or any lore. It's really just rules and information. And so the games are sold under a video game license.
Gotcha.
Yeah, so this happens. 5th edition comes out. People really love it. The OGL is back. Everybody's happy. We're hunky dory, and everything is going swimmingly. Let's fast forward a little bit to 2022. A couple of things happen. 2021, 2022. So,
I know one. COVID.
What?
COVID happened.
I guess we could talk about the pandemic. I think that does probably have a place in the moves that are made in the ensuing years. So 2020 comes around, we have the pandemic, the proliferation of virtual tabletops is instantaneous. I mean, Roll20 is a product that had been around for over a decade at this point when the pandemic comes around, and everybody's sort of vaguely aware that it exists, but the pandemic hits, boom, all of these virtual tabletops get a ton of users. Things that were really kind of simple side projects for people become full-time jobs with teams and things like that. So this sort of huge release of digital stuff. You also have things like Patreon. You have a bunch of creators that are creating content for Patreon, and they're doing exceptionally well, like unbelievably well. There are creators of D&D content who are really just releasing on Patreon, and they're making hundreds of thousands of dollars a year, and it's just like 1 or 2 people working on it.
I'm going to interrupt for an actual question too. The digital virtual stuff. What does this actually do? I mean, what aspect is digitized, is virtualized? Is it literally just like where you would write down your stats and stuff is digitized or?
Yeah, so that part is digitized, and it's different for every company. I think, like I was saying before, when you looked at the 2008 versions of these virtual tabletops, they all sort of specialized in something, and that's not really different today. So, like the preeminent option is Roll20, right? It's the one that everybody's most familiar with. It has it's a whiteboard that's gridded that you can upload pictures to use as maps, because you can play D&D in sort of 2 major ways. You have theater of the mind, which is where you're literally playing pretend 100%.
Just
your dungeon master is like describing what's around you, and then there's
that's
sort of
kind
like
of what I've always like. That's what you see in TV, right? I mean, that's like in Stranger Things. That would be what they're doing, right? They're just telling a story.
Yes, with the one exception, Stranger Things, they actually use a map and little miniatures.
Oh, did they? Okay.
On a table. Yeah. And so that's the other way to play. And so Roll20 gives you a way to move little miniatures called tokens.
Okay.
And you have like a map sitting there. But you can roll dice, you can upload a character sheet, you can do all sorts of stuff.
And this is all like on a computer screen?
I've never played in person, right? So I started playing maybe a month or 2 into quarantine, and we would meet online. And I have dice that sometimes I roll the dice by hand, but you also can just press a button and roll the dice.
Okay.
And
so there's an online interface.
Yeah.
Online interface. And then the DM will expose parts of the map as you go around a certain corner, or once if you decide to open a door, well, then you get to see what's behind the door. That sort of thing. And sometimes we don't have a map. Sometimes it is theater of the mind, but it offers that capability.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you. That was really just clarification on my part. I wasn't trying to be annoying in that moment. Other moments, yes, but
it was a good question. So you have all these virtual tabletops. You have Hasbro, who's actively out of the virtual tabletop game at this point, by matter of force. Really, they didn't have a ton of choices, and so the pandemic does a lot of good things for companies like D&D Beyond. D&D Beyond is a company who has an official license from Wizards of the Coast, from WotC.
More than just OGL?
Yes, they can actually. So they're one of the only online marketplaces where you can buy D&D books. You can buy PDFs. They have a nice little web portal where you can read all the books. You can build characters with it. They even have some very, very simple virtual tabletop functionality as well. Well, I don't remember if it was late 2021 or early 2022, but Wizards of the Coast decided to purchase D&D Beyond. So they paid a little over $100 million.
And when you say WotC purchase, this is still owned by Hasbro, right?
Hasbro.
So Hasbro purchased through WotC.
Exactly.
Kind of thing. Okay.
Yeah. Sort of WotC functions on its own. Like, people talk about WotC as though it is its own company still. But it's a subsidiary.
Okay,
yeah, exactly. So they buy D&D Beyond, and the entire industry starts swelling. Like, oh, this is interesting. They're probably going to build a virtual tabletop. They're going to build, maybe. And the one thing that everybody on the goddamn planet that plays D&D wants to see, please God, let me buy a book and get the digital version. And I think there's like only very minor circumstances where that's happening today, but because why sell it once when you can sell it twice, right? But so everybody, there's a lot of sort of chatter about what they're going to do in the digital space in the future. Mm-hmm. So then they also, in February of 2022 of last year, a woman named Cynthia Williams was made the CEO of Wizards of the Coast. And the previous CEO of Wizards of the Coast became the CEO of Hasbro.
Oh.
So, yeah. Okay. Magic is absolutely crushing it this whole time. Let's not forget. So there's like D&D has its troubles, but Wizards of the Coast is a money mill. It's a money factory in the form of Magic the Gathering.
Magic the Gathering online exchange, right? That was. Oh, really? Nobody?
Is that an old thing?
Do you guys not?
Oh, that's that. When you say it like that, it's vaguely familiar.
Yeah. So, okay, this is my little side. This is the one thing I know about. Magic the Gathering online exchange was an online exchange for Magic the Gathering things, but the guy either wasn't making money or whatever, but decided instead he was going to do Bitcoin. So that was the only place that you could actually buy and sell Bitcoin. And
that's initials how that company started?
Magic the Gathering, MTG, online exchange. That is the only place that you could buy and sell Bitcoin for like years when it became popular. And then in the end, big scandal, went under. It was based in Japan. There was little anybody could do. It was a weird thing. But yeah, that started as Magic the Gathering online exchange. That's what Mt. Gox stands for.
Wow, I had no idea. That is a great ad.
I contributed. Okay, go ahead. Anyway.
Yeah. So anyway, Magic the Gathering is fucking crushing it. And so the CEO of Wizards becomes the CEO of Hasbro. They bring in Cynthia Williams. Now, Cynthia Williams has an interesting past. She is from Xbox Gaming. So she led the gaming ecosystem commercial team, basically working on stuff like Xbox Game Pass. How do we monetize people after they buy a console? Before that, she worked at Amazon, working on Amazon fulfillment. Basically, you can ship your shit to Amazon, and Amazon will fulfill it. They'll deal with all the logistics of it. So basically, she's been working on monetizing people that are already in an ecosystem now for several years, and she has established that she's very good at it. So good at it. And honestly, I'm probably going to say some things that are going to lead people to believe that I feel unkindly towards this woman. It's a pretty impressive background, and I think that she's probably doing her best. It's not necessarily a judgment call. she's really good at monetization. For anybody that's listening that's curious, I'm a little more on the socialistic capitalism side. So take a guess. So anyway, they put Cynthia Williams in place, and Tim Fields becomes the senior vice president and general manager of digital. Tim is from a company called Kabam Games, who made a bunch of mobile apps, basically.
This is all inside Wizards of Waverly Place still? Okay.
Yes, we are still
Hasbro,
inside
still inside the sub compartment. Okay.
Exactly. So we have Tim Fields is in there too, who was CEO of a company who made a game called Disney Mirrorverse. Disney Mirrorverse is just a mobile game, whatever, with extraordinarily predatory microtransactions. Like this game, like nobody can even really like it that much because there's so many ads and there are a lot of microtransactions based on the reviews that I read.
Cool.
So yeah. So we've got people who are ready to make D&D a money-making machine. December 2022.
Recently.
Yep. Cynthia's in an investor and says, quote, the D&D brand is really under-monetized. And she also goes on to say that WotC wants to see, quote, the type of recurrent spending that you see in digital games. So we're starting to have conversations about D&D is not making enough money. Let's monetize.
Let's make a subscription service.
Right. Well, at this point, they've already purchased and own a subscription service that is based in D&D because D&D Beyond is a subscription service in and of itself. Okay. So they want to leverage this. They want to milk this cat even more. So
that's the one you went with. That's the animal you went with. Okay.
You landed right there.
I'm good
I
with
did.
that. Turpig was happy because she was worried she was gonna.
You're going to.
So that happens in December. We have this investor meeting. She says that whatever. There were some people that covered that and thought it was interesting. I also saw a news snippet that she has some general misunderstandings about like where D&D is from, etc. On January 5th, Gizmodo, and I think more specifically IO9, releases an article that shows a leaked new version of the open gaming license. That's right. We've had the open gaming license again for 9 years. They release the open, this sort of leak, this draft of the new OGL, OGL 1.1. And in the Gizmodo article, they say it significantly restricts the kind of content allowed and requires anyone making money under the license to report their products to Wizards of the Coast. We see this leak. This is January 5th of this year. This doc comes out. This leaked document comes out, and it does some things that are not controversial. It takes a stance on NFTs that is anti-NFT. It says it's against bigoted content and like, your license will be revoked if you ever do anything bigoted. It's ironic because the year previous, just last year, maybe it was 2021, they released a book called Spelljammer that is a re-release of sort of an older Dungeons and Dragons module. In that book, they have a species of sentient apes called the Hadazee. That's history is a wizard magically made them smart so that he could sell them as warriors and saviors, other apprentices and wizards prevent and free the apes. So that's just last year. So I just think that's a little bit of a fun ad there. Anyway, problematic. So
they called that one as this new addendum came out.
Oh, you should have seen the crow eating they did over that one. Yeah, that was people. The book got released and everybody was like, "Are you fucking serious?" Even more funny was the book that they released immediately before that was a book called Journeys Through the Radiant Citadel, which was an entirely POC, like made from top to bottom book based in cultures that were not medieval fantasy. So like they released this book that's like, yeah, we're inclusive. Also, we have sentient apes that a white wizard enslaves to make into warriors. But it's cool because other white wizards stop it from happening. Uh,
Wow.
D&D.
All right.
yeah, so D&D's got a lot of history there. We could have done a 4-hour podcast on that topic.
But this is so. But the
Yeah.
Ogle 1-1
yeah.
is
So
not released though. It's just leaked.
so this draft gets leaked,
Okay.
and so there's that stuff. There's stuff that's not super controversial, right? And then they really kind of get into the weeds in a couple places. So they require anyone at all that makes any content for 5e or any future system has to register with Wizards of the Coast, submit all of their revenue, and if you make over $750,000 a year, you submit guess what the percentage is?
25%.
25?
Yes, a
Wow.
25% royalty to Wizards of the Coast right off the top. So creators didn't love that.
So did they just scribble out the 4.0 like new license on the top of the draft, or?
It gets even better, Sean.
Okay.
They say under absolutely no circumstances can any virtual tabletop use D&D content or content that's created under the OGL. So they haven't announced yet. I mean, I think kind of at the same time they started teasing that they were going to release a virtual tabletop, and they still plan on doing that, but they haven't like officially said at this point, like, we're going to release a VTT. I don't think. But they are saying you can't use any other VTTs.
But how would that affect people who are already operating under the existing license?
Yeah, so it gets better.
Oh, okay.
All of this stuff that I'll talk about and the stuff that I already have talked about was in this document. The document had a signature line on it. The document wasn't very clearly marked draft, etc. It said that the previous OGL was completely invalid and basically null and void. So you could not keep producing or selling content under the previous. You had to sign this license or you were not a part of this anymore. And companies with valuable IP, generally speaking, that are the size of Hasbro, don't tend to not send cease and desist, right? They will litigate, absolutely. So there's the VTT thing, there's the royalty thing. You have to register. This is where it really starts to embolden really small community members. WotC has a legal right to use, reproduce, and resell any content that you create under this. So if you create a class, a like warrior class or a race or an item, whatever, and WotC likes it, cool. It's theirs now. You can't do anything about it. They don't even have to credit you.
Like a pocket dimension of sexually active unicorns?
Yes.
They could
I'm worried I
win.
spoke about it now because it may not even exist, and I now understand they're going to want it if I just made that up.
Not only are they going to want it, they're going to, you're going to have to license now. Yeah.
Yep. They also go on to say that it can be terminated. The agreement that you have with WotC can be terminated at any time for any reason without recompense. So you sign this agreement to give 25% of your money away for them to use whatever they want, and they can just say, you know what? You don't have this anymore. A lot of community members, a lot of third-party content creators who it is rumored perhaps that some of them were approached with this document and actually asked to sign this draft that was like, there are companies like Kobold Press, Paizo, who makes Pathfinder, Mage Hand Press, banded together and leveraged their sort of collective voice to rebel in this super effective way. So like overnight, they spun up a website that goes over all the problems with this document. They got a petition that had 77,000 signatures. They began working on a couple of different versions of an open gaming license that is sort of reminiscent of D&D, and where they were trying to basically, and they still are, trying to build an open system like the one that Paizo is related to is called ORC, O-R-C. I don't remember. Open...
Role-playing cool kids.
Probably. Yep. So all of these people spin this stuff up. Hashtag D&D Be Gone, a play on D&D Beyond, starts trending on Twitter. And we don't know how many, but a non-trivial amount of the D&D Beyond user base cancels their description. Did I say description? Subscription.
Gotcha.
They cancel their subscription, and again, WotC has literally just paid over $100 million for this product, and so now they're hemorrhaging subscriptions. Everybody on the internet, especially Twitter, is so pissed off about this. All of these creators are coming out and they're saying, like, we're arms locked. We are a community. They can't do this. We will continue to make our own game. So if you're in that position, Sean, you've done something that is becoming a bit of an oopsie. What do you do?
Me or
You.
or company?
What do you
Company
do?
that is profitable. Me, I would back down and I would be humble and I would be like, well, yeah, I don't know what I was thinking. I am no better than Taturfig, my goat.
Love it. So that's a great answer. The second part of that, though, the part where you were humble, arguable whether or not that happened with Wizards. So they go on an apology tour. They were totally silent for a week, and everybody is just like, why the fuck aren't they saying anything? This is crazy. In everybody's minds, that's just kind of validating what they're thinking. So they publish a series of articles and apologies, and they're like still publishing. This is kind of, it's not as active anymore, but this is very much still happening, I think. They release this blog post that's basically oops. And one of the things they say that I think it just strikes me and a lot of other people as hilarious. So it's this big apology. Like, first things first, so sorry. We basically misread this whole situation. We didn't think you guys were going to pay this. So, and I quote, "You're going to hear people say that they won and we lost because making your voices heard forced us to change our plan. Those people will only be half right. They won, and so did we." Because they're listening. Right? So that goes over about as well as a human could expect. Not. People did not buy this. They're unconvinced. This whole we all win when everybody's a bitch to us was just not holding water for most people. So the executive producer of D&D, this guy named Kyle Brink, goes on a media crow eating tour. He's now doing interviews with a ton of people. I've pulled a couple of snippets from an interview that he did with a YouTube channel who's pretty cool. I just discovered it today. It's called Three Black Halflings. They ask really thoughtful questions, but it's a small channel. They only have like 1,500 subscribers, and this is a big deal. So, he's like all over the place. He's talking to huge names, but he's also talking to a lot of people. They ask him, why? Why did you do this? Like, what's the reason behind your decision to change the OGL? And here's
like
what
to change it for the worse or to backpedal?
Change it for the worse.
Okay.
Yeah, and here's what he says.
And so it's to me, it's maybe, I don't know, it seems a little bit like a weird thing to get hung up on because of how drafts work, but I'm in the book business, so I see drafts all the time. So maybe that's why I see it that way.
That was the wrong thing, but I think that's hilarious nonetheless. They say, this is a draft. Fuck, that was the wrong clip. We just used the wrong clip, everybody. My first time using sound bites, and it's the wrong goddamn one. Here it is. Here is the clip that I wanted to play.
Can you provide an overview of the decision-making process that went into the original wording that was leaked?
Yeah, so the things that were in 1.1, that was a terrible way to approach the goals we had in mind, which is why it was such an easy. So it was easy for us to do a U-turn and abandon those right away.
Right. So that's his response. Why did you do that? Well, it sucked. So it was really easy for us to take back. Now he also said in a couple of different moments that they had actually been working on this for years at this point. So before this draft comes out, they had been having conversations about this new OGL for years, And his response to why did you do that is, yeah, it was stupid. And that's why it was so easy to get rid of.
Yeah, we didn't like it anyway.
Yeah. It's just a sort of like
It leaked because we threw it in the
hubris-filled-
trash can and somebody found it.
Yeah, and it's just like, what, dude? And so, and this is the clip that I messed up and played. He's asked a question about like, okay, so like, but this document like had a place for signatures and it seemed pretty final. And he kind of goes on this tangent about he defines what a draft is, and then he says this,
And
which
so
is,
it's to me, it's maybe, I don't know, it seems a little bit like a weird thing to get hung up on because of how drafts work, but I'm in the book business, so I see drafts all the time. So maybe that's why I see it that way.
you just don't understand what a draft is.
Yeah.
Community.
A draft is nothing like what is released in the end.
Yeah.
The signature line is what we put on there first.
Yep.
Yeah, and so that's his response to the draft thing. And he says, "I have one more clip for you." There's this comment about the royalty structure and like how detrimental that is to creators. The question is basically like, how did you come up with this royalty structure, the rights to resell, all that stuff?
Yeah, so we still have a lot of real concerns about big media corps moving into the D&D space, new technologies that weren't considered when the OGL was first written, the emergence of some hateful content that's coming around out there. When you have a bigger community, you have a bigger duty, and we're just worried about the impact of some of these things.
And so he goes on to say later on that what he means by big media is not like a Wizards of the Coast. It's like meta size and Twitter. So he's got this like, basically the line is that, really the only people that are making over $750,000 a year, the people that we were targeting are companies like Meta.
And so they were being noble.
Yeah. Yeah.
They're doing the little guy a favor.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, they're protecting their community. They're not monetizing. And so sort of that apology tour happens simultaneously that everything is stripped, like that whole document. They literally walked back. Not only did they walk back the document, they walked back any changes, and they put the OGL under a legitimately Creative Commons license.
Oh. And is that official? Was that released?
That is official. It is done. So the OGL, as it stands today, is a Creative Commons license thing, which means nobody can touch it.
Yeah, and it can't be invalidated by version 1.2. Draft or no draft. Okay.
Yeah. So it remains to be seen what the outcome of this in the end is, because you have two very, very talented monetization folks that are working on leading this organization. You have a software product coming. You have them seeing things as in sort of the way that digital is the future. And we know that they want to rein in their creative license on all this stuff. So what they're going to do in the future, who knows? But in the end, they have walked everything back and everybody's kind of walking on eggshells.
Well, I enjoyed that very much, Asher. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Asher. That was a tremendous amount of information that I did not know. And I insulted lots of people along the way. So there's always that to carry on.
I think I did too. I made a lot of mistakes in there. So don't quote me on any of that.
But I will be bringing that information into my game tonight.
Yeah. The accuracy of everything presented in this podcast is
the disclaimer is strong.
Yeah.
We're all
Ben is responsible for fact checking today, and he is a piece of paper taped to a chair. So we went longer than we've ever gone, longer than we expected.
Yeah, sorry about that.
No, it was awesome. It was actually really enjoyable. Daniel, we're the ones with beverages to drink. Do you want to drink them today, or do you want to wait? I mean, we could do a beverage list thing. We have a line of drinks. Really, this whole podcast is just my way of getting people to try weird drinks with me at the end. And so, without Ben, it just doesn't seem right. So, so this will be a dry episode. And that was awesome. I asked my questions along the way, but Daniel, did you want to
So glad you did.
interrogate
I
Asher
asked,
about
I
stuff
asked my
at
questions
all?
along the way too, and some of them
Alright.
really were just. I don't think they benefited anyone but me. So thank
No,
you for that.
that's not true. Thanks for sitting with me through that. Hopefully, I didn't mess too much with that.
That
No
was
idea. There
awesome.
was so much information about that. I really did not realize.
And oddly enough, this week's sponsor is Taturfig's Milk. So, I mean,
Thank
it
God.
worked out really well because, yeah.
What are the attributes what are the stats on Taturpic's milk?
Well, I'm not sure where the licensing stands because I was trying to license it under the 1.1 Ogle license.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, I was a little bit worried about going over $750,000 in revenue, but I guess now there's no limit, right? Get working, to Turfig.